All right, hello everyone. We are just waiting to get everyone into the room and then we'll get started. Thanks so much for joining us today. We're so excited to have this group of presenters today and talking on this topic. So we'll just give it another 30 seconds or so to get to the top of the hour and then get started. Okay. All right, well, we are just gonna get going right away here. Welcome everyone today. I am Danielle Varda. I am the CEO and founder of Visible Network Labs. I'm also a professor at the School of Public Affairs at the University of Colorado, Denver, and really happy today to be hosting our monthly webinar from our webinar series on social connectedness. Today, we're talking about understanding social connectedness among young adults. And we are going to get into introductions for our speakers soon, but I didn't want to delay in letting you know what a great panel we have today. I'm going to do introductions and we're going to hear from each of these folks in just a little bit. But today we are joined by some of our social connectedness fellows and our program officer from NEKC, Dr. Kimberly Spring. So just a little bit about everyone today. Martha is Martha Gonzalez from Atlanta, Georgia, loves expanding her network through new opportunities in the workplace or school environment. Current student at Atlanta Metropolitan State College through a program named Year Up. Kyra Stout is a student at Georgia State University studying marketing. She's a member of Atlanta Glow, a nonprofit organization that provides mentorship, leadership development, and life skill training opportunities to underserved women and girls. And Zoe Crocker from Orlando, Florida, is currently an undergraduate student at the University of South Florida, finishing her degree in interdisciplinary social sciences with concentrations in international studies and sociology. She's also the creator and moderator of a chat room served for the Orlando Youth Alliance, a support group for LGBTQ+ youth. And Dr. Spring is the Director of Research and Evaluation, leading the team at NEKC responsible for developing and managing evaluations of programs and systems reforms initiatives that advance the efforts of the foundation and others. So you're going to hear a lot more from them soon. I'm going to just briefly talk about Visible Network Labs and why we do this. We're a company that is striving to make invisible networks visible. We're a social enterprise. Our goal is to really make sure everyone has the social support that they need. And so we use technology and training and workshops, community building like this to make that happen. This is our fabulous team. We have data scientists, engineers, product, but we build a lot of really neat things using a network science lens. And so our goal is to try to kind of connect the dots, both at the individual level and the systems level, to try to figure out, like, how do we strengthen social connectedness, find gaps, and make outcomes better for communities and people. We do that through two primary ways. We have a partner platform that collects data on systems and how organizations and members of those organizations or people connect and how that impacts outcomes, but also Partner Me, which is going to be a little bit more of the focus of what we're talking about today. Partner Me is a tool that we have that looks at social connectedness of individuals and using neat drawing methods and concepts around kind of hard to measure things like social connectedness. We use that to try to understand where a person might need more help or not. The goals of our webinar series really is to do two primary things, and one is strengthen social connectedness in any way we can. But we know that we're only one type of solution, only one type of company or community organization. So we also believe that we need to build a community, or that we can be a part of a community. So towards that goal, we hope that you all will consider you part of our community and this community. Right away, if you would like to introduce yourself in the chat, we would love that, to know where you are, what your interest is in this topic. And we're always looking for new partners and presenters and things like that. So please feel like you should stay connected with us at all times. This is our webinar schedule for the rest of the year. You can find it online if you just go to the VNL website. The next two are I have a couple slides on. So the first one is programs to strengthen social connectedness among young people. So that'll be our March webinar. So today you'll get to hear from our fellows and the work that they're doing and learning about, and next month we'll hear from some programs. And then in May, we're looking at strengthening social connectedness among veterans. So we hope that you'll continue to stay connected with us and be a part of this community. We do also run an in-person event called the Network Innovation Summit in October. So if you're interested in getting together with like-minded people and you want to build these skills and learn about these kinds of ideas and communities, please check that out. But today our topic is on social connectedness in young people. So, you know, this is from the CDC. There's a link down there if you're more interested in more about this project. But looking at adolescent connectedness is something that I'm sure everyone on the call is pretty interested in. And I don't think I have to say this more than one sentence, but we know that youth connectedness is an important protective factor of health and well-being. And of course, that's why this is really an important, thing for us to be focusing on. And one last thing on this, I mentioned Partner Me, but we've been working on Partner Me as a way to kind of highlight social connectedness. If you listen to our first webinar from January, you'll hear all about it. But there was a time when we started thinking about how does this kind of approach work for young people? And it's different for our older adults or families and things like that. Their needs are different, the way they conceptualize social connectedness, the way they draw these networks and tell us about how they're looking to different kinds of connections for help changes. This is my daughter when she was 8, kind of inspired me to start thinking about this kind of approach for young people. And since then, we've been able to look at it in a few different ways. We worked with some Girls Inc. interns for a little bit to really flesh out some of these questions. And then luckily we met Kimberly from Annie Casey some time ago, but she connected the dots for us and kind of said, what if we take this approach, but not just see if we can use Partner Me with communities and kids and things like that. But what if we studied this for a year and really try to understand from the perspective of youth what social connectedness really looks like and feels like for them? So it was from her an inspiration and leadership that we were able to kind of put this program together that you'll hear so much about today. So I'd like to introduce Dr. Spring to you and ask Kimberly if you might talk a little bit about the foundation and the foundation's interest in this area and kind of how you've led this project to this point.
Sure, thanks, Danielle. I'm really happy to be here today. So as Danielle mentioned, I'm at the Annie Casey Foundation. The foundation's mission is to help build a brighter future for America's children, their families, and their communities. And to really do that, to strive to ensure that all young people, no matter their race, their background, or their zip code, can fully realize their potential. So while the foundation has remained committed to supporting young people from birth to adulthood, in 2021, we made a commitment to dedicate at least half of our investments over the next decade to support youth and young adults. And for that, we're looking at young people who are between the ages of 14 and 24. And it's what we at the foundation refer to as Thrive by 25. Could you move to the next slide? Why youth and young adults? So we really see this period of adolescence as a critical time in a person's life. It's a time of tremendous learning and growth. It's a time when people are developing their identities, their relationships, and their life skills. And it's a time when they need supportive older adults and also the right developmental experiences to foster their growth. So next slide. So you can actually move to the slide after that. So for Casey and our partners, really understanding young people's social support networks, who they connect with and how they want to connect, is crucial to understanding how we as older adults can help to strengthen those networks and support young people in achieving their aspirations. And at the same time, it's important for older adults to recognize young people as experts in their own lives and that they should have a voice in the decisions that impact them. And so for those reasons, I really wanted to invest in a project that could help us understand youth social connectedness, but to also do it in a way where young people were at the center of the work, where not only they could they had the opportunity to learn about network science, but that we would have the opportunity to learn from them. And that the result would, the work would be resources that are relevant and beneficial for young people today. And so I'm really proud of the work that the fellows in the Youth Social Connectedness Project have accomplished, and I'm grateful to the staff of VNL for how they supported the fellows, really allowing us to explore the ways in which young people think about their social support networks, and also to reshape how we imagine these connections can happen. And then ultimately, with the goal of being able to develop a survey instrument that is designed for young people.
Awesome. All right, thank you. You can see why we've been really inspired and by Kimberly and her leadership on this. One of the, and you're going to hear a little bit more from her in a moment too, one of the things we really love to do on these webinars, and when I say we're trying to build a community, this is part of it, we do a section called Visible Us, and in Visible Us, we try to learn a little bit more about the audience and then also the presenters. So we talk a lot about how we get presentations and we see the slides, but we don't really get to always know about the people behind the projects. And so this is kind of our moment to do that. So what I'm going to ask everyone to do who is attending, if you wouldn't mind, you can take a screenshot of this QR code or go down to this link and use this code. And what you'll do is you'll go to a Mentimeter site. That site, a lot of you are probably familiar with. I'm going to switch over to it in a minute, but I want to leave this up. And maybe actually, let me get this into the chat. There's two questions that you're going to be asked to answer, and they are, who are you? So we just kind of want to know, okay, I'm going to go out of here for a second. We want to know who is on the call, not just like what your title is and the job you have, but you'll see, oh, there it is. Thank you, Alex, for putting that in there. What you'll see is that there's also characteristics that we're interested in. So for example, what kind of person you are, maybe what your interests are, things like that. So thanks for getting it started while I kind of fumble through this. There we go. All right, so who are you? What are adjectives about you? What's your hobby? We just love to do this. Take a minute to have let people answer so we can get a sense of the kind of people that are joining this kind of webinar, the kind of folks that make up communities around social connectedness. So awesome, thank you. And what we do is we collect these, and then we sometimes show them each time. We had a lot packed in here, so we're not going to review last month, but we hope to share all of these as we go forward. So this is just awesome. You can see just the wide characteristics of people who are in this field doing this work. So awesome. Cool. I wonder if someone, even maybe from my team, can you see the second question yet, or do I have to go to the next slide? Can someone, can you see the next question? Can someone give me a thumbs up? No, thanks, Kaylee. All right, don't stop on there. I think if I move, it might not work, but I think that if I go, to the next one. All right, the next one is, what 3 words represent youth social connectedness to you? Do you see this opportunity to answer? Yes, thank you, Elena. So this we do every single time as well. And so if our topic is older adults, veterans, whatever it is, we find it just really interesting to hear how people are thinking about youth social connectedness from this perspective. So I don't know if, oh, there we go. I didn't know if it wasn't working, but and we do plan also to put these kind of side by side, and it is really fascinating to see how we conceptualize social connectedness across different populations. So thank you for spending a minute on here. Great. So we see trust and community support, right? And then friends. Great. Non-judgmental, tech savvy, comfort, bonds, love, resilience, technology. Great. Listener. Cool. Oh, look, Annie Casey Foundation popped in there. Good. Well, the good news is you're going to hear a lot more of these kinds of words and thoughts from our fellows today as they talk about what they've been learning. So go ahead and keep filling that in if you can. I'm going to move us along, so I'm going to go ahead and come out of here. But if you haven't put your words in, maybe go ahead and do that real quick so we can. This is kind of almost like a data collection point for us to really understand what people are thinking. All right, so I kind of got to get out of there and get back to our slides. All right, thank you all. It helps us to kind of connect and know each other. So before we do our presentations, we're going to get this opportunity to hear a little bit more from this great panel. So this part, I'm going to ask Martha and Kyra and Zoe to just answer a couple questions, and we'll just do it kind of round robin. So for each of you, just a few sentences, really what inspired you to join the Social Connectedness Fellowship? And is there anything that you're learning and applying that you'll be able to take to your life and career? So maybe I'll ask Zoe to go first. I see you in my screen.
Sure. Thank you, Danielle. What inspired me to join the Social Connectedness Fellowship is that I'm currently majoring in social sciences, and I was really, really excited to do research that was related to my field that would also help young people like myself. And as for what I'm learning and how it applies to my life and career, I know Danielle mentioned earlier that I'm a volunteer chat room moderator for my youth group, Orlando Youth Alliance. And that works a lot with young adults in that same sort of 13 to 24 age range. So I can take a lot of what I've learned here about connecting and supporting young people and use that to give more support to the chat room members going forward. And I'm very excited to put some of that into practice.
Awesome. Thank you, Zoe. Okay, Kyra, I'm going to go on over to you. You're next to Zoe in my boxes. So Kyra, what's inspired you to join this fellowship, and is there anything that you're taking away?
Sure. So my mentor, Ashley James from Atlanta Glow, inspired me to join this fellowship. And I was really interested in it because I was always interested in personal development and sharing resources and information I come across with others in my life. And even though I never heard of the term social connectedness before, it felt like something I was already kind of immersed in. And learning that this research would benefit young people really felt like it aligns with my purpose. Now, what I've taken from this fellowship and how it'll benefit me in life, well, first and foremost, it really taught me more mindfulness about showing up for others and supporting others in my life. And I'm truly grateful for that. And then career-wise, collaborating on this project with a very supportive team and really intelligent and talented colleagues, Zoe, Martha, and we had another fellow, Yami. And I definitely know that this will enable me to, in my goal in advocating for youth in the foster care system.
Oh, Kyra, thank you. That was great to hear. And Martha, I'm going to ask you to go last here and answer the same questions.
Yes, I was inspired to join the Social Connectedness Fellowship because it gave me an opportunity to learn new things. Mindfulness is definitely one of them. Learning how to analyze data. That was a very big skill that I gained that I really enjoyed from this fellowship. And it also gave me an opportunity to improve the way that I reach out to friends when it comes to like sending them resources. So yeah. And the second question, how will you take what you learn, learning and applying it to your life and career? I would say that one thing I learned and that I will always apply it is active virtual interactions instead of passive virtual interactions. They're so important. Ever since I learned about this concept, I have used it, and it's actually like helped me like grow more socially and increase my network. both formally and informally.
Wow. Awesome. Okay, we're going to hear from all three of our fellows who are each going to do a presentation on their research. But you can see why we've been so excited about working with them. Before we move on, I'm just going to ask Kimberly actually to answer a question also. We like to know the person behind the project. So Kimberly, a couple questions for you. What has been your professional journey into social connectedness? And is there anything that you've learned from the fellows that, apply to that learning?
Yeah. So yeah, I appreciate these questions. I love the first question, of course. So I thought about it. I feel like there's kind of two parts to that. The first, it has this roots in the fact that I had a long-standing curiosity around how people perceive and understand the world. And then that led me to really having to recognize that our relationships with others in our environment really affects those perceptions. And so I ended up in the field of sociology, similar to Zoe, and really interested in how both we are shaping our world and our world shapes us. And just recognizing that who we are is fundamentally shaped by others and our interactions with them. But then you combine that with, which really has to do more with my career and the fact that my work has really been involved in working with organizations that are committed to social justice, and the recognition that the challenges that we face as a society really require a collective effort and an understanding of how we're interconnected. So I think taking both those two together, it becomes quite natural that I have a real strong interest in social connectedness. I think in terms of what I've learned, I think a lot of what I get out of this project is actually just is being inspired by the fellows. But I would say one of the things that I've learned, and I'll keep it short so we can actually get to what they actually found through the research, is around the role of technology. And the idea, the fact that younger generation has grown up with a very different relationship to technology than I did and older adults have. And I think that and I've heard this from other adults as well, we tend to see technology as something that takes people away from connecting with others. It creates distance. I think there's a lot that we hear about how it harms people's mental and emotional well-being. And I think the fellows have really helped me to think more about this with a little bit more nuance. I think to Martha's point around distinguishing between passive and active forms of technology, I think this is something that we really would benefit from understanding better within the field of social connectedness.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Kimberly. No doubt that we have an amazing group of presenters here today, so we're going to get to it. But I am very happy to introduce you to Dr. Rose Hardy, who is a network scientist here at Visible Network Labs and has been leading a lot of the learning and conversation discussion for the fellows. And I'm going to hand it off to her. In fact, Rose, I'm going to stop sharing. And so she can start. And Rose is going to talk about what these fellows have done. What is the work? And then pass it on, and Zoe will get started. So.
Thank you, Danielle. Always takes a moment, doesn't it? Okay. There we go. It's a pleasure to be here, and we have had the pleasure of working with Zoe and Kyra and Martha here at VNL for almost a year now to get a better sense of how young people have been thinking about social connectedness, social support, and how organizations and others can better support them. And we're talking about young adults between the ages of, say, 14 and 24. I know definitions are always a little bit fuzzy when we're talking about this group. But one of the things that we first started doing was to develop a key informant interview guide with the fellows. And then we interviewed 28 young adults to understand their thoughts on how youth connected to one another, how they connected to older generations, as well as some of their own experiences when organizations and others had offered support or help, and what made them more or less likely to accept that help. From those interviews, as well as Zoe, Martha, and Kyra's knowledge, we started to think about how we wanted to quantitatively measure this kind of connectedness, and how we can think about tools that would better support youth as they grow and work to achieve their goals in life. So ultimately, we decided to take that survey here at VNL, that Partner Me survey, and modify it for young adults with what we had learned from the quantitative and qualitative work, or sorry, what we'd learned from the qualitative work and from the fellows' own experience and expertise. And then we pilot tested that this past winter with 43 young adults in the fellows' broader networks. So the more detailed findings from that work can be found in that fellowship webpage that I have up there. Today, the fellows are going to be sharing some of their findings from this work, some of the things that they found most interesting or that have resonated the most with them. And so Zoe is going to start us off by presenting some of the latest work on the qualitative or quantitative survey. And then Kyra will share some of the qualitative findings, and then Martha will share some thoughts on the sort of synthesis of those two and what we're planning on doing next. So with that, I will hand it over to Zoe.
Thank you, Rose. So today I'm going to be talking about what we've learned from some of our quantitative findings from our study. So let's jump right in. Okay, so for the quantitative portion of the study, young adults in the US aged 14 to 24 were recruited by us fellows, the Visible Network Labs team, and youth organizations in our networks. The survey, as we've said before, was an adaptation of Visible Network Labs Partner Me tool, and that was administered between November and December 2021. Participants were compensated with a $10 gift card upon completion of the survey. And the data from the interviews that we conducted during the qualitative portion of the study was used to adapt the Partner Me screener for use with young adults. And questions regarding school, identity, mental health, future planning, and comfort asking for help were added to the survey in light of the qualitative findings. And we also added open-ended connections about social connectedness to the adapted survey. In the quantitative portion of the study, we had 43 participants from Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, and a few who did not list a location. 63% of the participants were women, 20% were men, and the remaining 17% identified as non-binary, genderqueer, questioning, or did not respond to the question about their gender. Participants' ages were mostly evenly distributed across that range of 14 to 24, with the largest group being 19 to 21 and the smallest group being 22 to 24. In terms of race, 40% of participants were Black, 27.5% were white, 17.5% identified as mixed race or listed more than one race, 10% were Asian, and 5% identified as a race other than what was listed. And I really love this word cloud that we have here on the right. This is the responses that we received when participants were asked to share their racial, ethnic, and cultural backgrounds in their own words. And we received this really impressive, vast array of responses, and they tended to fall into a few different categories. They used their race, such as Caucasian, Asian, or Black, nationalities, such as Jamaican, Korean, and Russian, religions, such as Jewish, Catholic, and Muslim, and other identifiers, such as first generation. And this shows a lot about how young people identify themselves and what parts of their identity that they consider important. And continuing on with demographics, about 75% of the participants were enrolled in school, mainly college. And the bar graph to the top left shows the school levels of the participants. In terms of household structure, there was about an equal number of participants who lived with two parents, who lived with one parent, and who lived in a household without their parents. And 9% of participants split their time between their parents' homes. And finally, approximately 20% of participants were caring for their siblings or other young adults in their household or even their own children. When we asked youth to define what social support meant to them, a few themes emerged. They tended to define social support as their family, friends, and other members of their support network who show encouragement and care about them, listen to them and show understanding of what they have to say, help them with their physical and mental health, and provide them with advice and guidance in their lives. We also asked youth what factors make them more or less likely to accept help and resources. Youth were more likely to accept help and resources when the person or people involved had experienced similar struggles. Those offering the resources were non-judgmental. The focus was on the young adult rather than other motives. They were assured of the confidentiality of the resource. The resource was convenient, meaning that it was reachable by walking or public transportation. The resource was free of charge for them to access, and the resource was recommended by trusted sources, such as people in their network, their friends, their family, teachers, coaches, or other people that they know. In contrast, youth were less likely to accept help when they perceived that asking for help would lead them to be seen as weak, asking for help would bother or burden the person from whom they were seeking help. There were too many hoops to jump through before they could access the resource, or they felt that their confidentiality could be violated, especially without their knowledge or consent, such as by a mandatory reporter. And they were especially concerned with confidentiality, that police or other authorities might get involved as a result of their accessing a resource. And I've personally seen this concern in my life about confidentiality with LGBTQ+ youth, who are often afraid that they might be outed when they seek support, or young people who are avoiding accessing mental health care due to fears and misconceptions regarding involuntary hospitalization. And that can be especially exacerbated, like if they think it's necessary or crisis situations, they still won't access the help because they're worried about that confidentiality. The areas in which young adults reported needing the most help were future planning, access to resources, transportation, getting to and from school, and sex education. There were gender and racial differences in which the needs were identified. Twice as many women as men identified future planning as a need. 75% of Black youth identified future planning as a need compared to 27% of white youth. And 72% of white youth identified transportation as a need compared to 28% of mixed race youth and 25% of Black youth. Another area in which youth responses differed was age. These graphs show how many youths in each age group tended to need help in the areas covered by the survey. We saw youth of all ages tend to need help in mental health and social areas, including talking about their feelings and anxiety. You can see those areas highlighted in orange. And that suggests that these needs are coming from something that isn't related to their age, such as the COVID-19 pandemic or the increase in digital socialization among young people. However, when they were different among age groups, for example, younger youth, which are highlighted here in blue, they tended to need more help with things like depression, talking to others, and making friends compared to their older counterparts. For those age groups, it might be helpful to offer those resources via school or virtually, since they're less likely to have access to transportation that can help them reach another location. They also needed more help in school-related areas, which are highlighted in green. College youth especially reported needing help in these areas, indicating that they may need more targeted resources for that demographic. These resources could be made available on college campuses for maximum convenience, and college resources in particular could be promoted through faculty, staff, and peer ambassadors, basically other young college people who are in that position. They could help promote those resources to increase their trust. And finally, older youth tended to need help in areas like paying bills, which indicates that support is needed even after leaving secondary educational or post-secondary educational settings. And because older youth are more likely to be able to access transportation compared to their younger counterparts, those resources could be provided in a central location such as a library or community center to maximize the resources that they're exposed to. Overall, more white youth tended to be receiving help in the areas listed compared to youth of color. These discrepancies were highest in anxiety and depression, suggesting that mental health support may be less accessible to youth of color compared to their white counterparts, or that the more clinical sounding terminology here, using anxiety and depression instead of feeling nervous or feeling sad, might be affecting how the youth were answering this question. Areas where youth of color and white youth reported receiving similar help included areas like dating and relationship conflict and worried about paying bills. And only youth of color reported receiving help in the following areas: balancing school and personal life, managing societal expectations, managing job responsibilities, getting a job, sexuality, feeling safe at school, trouble understanding others, and trouble having others understand me. And one really important thing to note is that 35% of youth of color responded needing help with none of these, while no white youth responded none of these. And this could indicate that the areas listed might have been unclear, like I mentioned before with the anxiety and depression, or that there were areas in which youth of color do need help that were missing from the survey. And finally, we have these network maps here. These show connections between areas in which youth of color are getting help on the left and areas in which youth of color need help on the right. The circles represent different areas in which they need help, and their size correlates with the number of youth who reported getting help or needing help. The lines between them mean that youth reported both areas. Where the lines are thicker, more youth reported both of those areas. Many of the issues with which youth of color reported getting help also appeared among the issues in which they need help. You can see that they have boxes to highlight them. This suggests that they need more or different help in these areas, or that the help for these areas is not reaching all of the youth of color who need it. The interconnectedness of these areas suggests that appropriate help in a central area highlighted in yellow, such as schoolwork and grades or talking about my feelings, would also help youth improve in the connected areas.
Okay, awesome. Zoe, thank you so much. That was a great start. We're gonna transition to Kyra in just a second, but just before we do that, I'm gonna ask each of you at the end of your presentations, in just a sentence or two, is there what, surprised you about these findings or left you with more questions?
I was really surprised by that statistic that nearly 20% of the participants were responsible for caring for someone younger than them, be that their siblings, their own children, or other young people in their household. And we didn't include any questions about access to childcare or support in looking after younger people. So I think it might be really interesting to look at that further.
Great. Awesome. Thank you. Okay. So great job, Zoe. I'm going to switch over to Kyra now. Kyra's going to talk about our qualitative results. So whenever you're ready, Kyra, go ahead and start.
Sure. So, hey, everyone, I'm going to cover some findings I've learned from our qualitative research. So, us fellows collaborated with VNL to interview adolescents and young adults. Before conducting our search with finding the participants, we brainstormed research questions that were relevant for their experiences. We've worked to make our questions open-ended, and all of the responses we received were all meaningful and diverse. We asked them questions surrounding their hobbies, interests, goals, and their thoughts on social connectedness and resources. Yes. So after we solidified our interview prompt, each of us began our quest for finding potential interviews. This was like in the beginning of the semester, so early August. And this was a great time to find people as there's many events going on campus and whatnot. So we were able to find 23 males, 23 females, and 2 non-binary young adults. At first, I thought that we'd end up with a larger sample size of younger people who would mainly be interested in the gift cards, but I was mistaken there. I had the opportunity to interview a couple of them and sit in some other interviews as well. And they all felt like a natural conversation as we progressed through. We even went over the allotted time in a couple of them. And I think it's amazing how comfortable and eager these young people were to share their stories. Next slide. Yes, thanks. So here we have a couple of quotes from multiple young adults. Now, when we asked them to define social support, the young adults always included a degree of emotional support in their responses. The emotional support could be having someone listen to them, give advice, spending quality time together, and mentorship. Most of them mentioned mental health support being an important component as well. Next slide. Yes. So young adults felt older adults were more confident in reaching into their support network due to them having more established relationships with their peers. Also having more resources, such as having a stable income. And some of the interviewees said that older adults have more access to reliable information sources such as news subscriptions, whereas younger people tend to get caught up on current events from social media and run the risk of viewing false information instead. So I thought that was interesting since this point came up a few times, and having more general life experiences was also considered very valuable to the interviewees. The older adults' relationships were perceived as healthy and strong, even when they didn't connect as often with some of their network. Younger adults reported that the older adults in their lives mostly connected with each other through meeting in person, phone calls that go on for hours on end, and even letter writing. The letter writing was also another unexpected mode of communication. I didn't know people still did that anymore, but it's really touching. And next slide. So unlike older adults, the young adults tread with more caution when they seek support, and they prefer in-person relationships because they feel more real. They view social connectedness, they view social media as a passive form of communication. So also, when it came to actively seeking help in areas they need, introverted youth preferred going to their friends and family. Some even expressed feeling uncomfortable with reaching out to school counselors because it felt inorganic. So I have a couple of quotes here from other interviews. So a little over half of young adults denied resources due to lack of trust or them feeling disconnected from their network. Any judgment can discourage young adults from seeking support. The judgment can look like an older person in their life shaming them for having lack of experience or them being alienated from their peers. So the qualitative findings provide the stories and lived experiences, the context behind the numerical values that we looked at in the quantitative study. I really feel that by conducting these interviews, it gave the young adults a voice and a sense of feeling like they're making an impact, since many were interested in our findings. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share today.
Awesome job, Kyra. Thank you. I'm going to ask you the same question before we go over to Martha, but what was there anything in here that surprised you or left you with more questions?
Yes, so although I didn't mention this part, but I was really surprised to find that some of our younger participants, more in the high school age range, 16 to 18-year-old, felt like they were more inhibited when it came to seeking help with their support networks compared to the older participants. So the older participants, more likely college students, said that they received a lot more support in regards to their academics, their career, and their support networks seem to be larger as well. So my question would be, how can we, what other methods could we think of to better support high school age young adults? Because another reason why it surprised me, because I thought that high school students would be more supported since they tend to live with their family and their parents, but that's not the case, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's pretty fascinating. Those are great questions. I hope we get to keep learning about those with you. Okay, Martha, are you ready? Martha's gonna finish us out with what we've learned from all of this. So go ahead, Martha, whenever you're ready.
Okay. So during our journey here at BNL, we have learned that young people connect with different people in their network about certain topics they may need support with. And this will help us find different ways to strengthen social support networks within young people. I'm super excited to share the rest of our findings with you. Young people seek help mainly from informal support members such as family, friends, and significant others. Some young adults are skeptical about receiving support, and young men tended to have fewer sources of support because they were more skeptical about resources that seemed ingenuine or forced them to compensate back. Young people have different types of needs, a portion being emotional, which entails listening, mentorship, physical touch, and another need is financial support, which deals with monetary support in schooling, shelter, and etc. Some individuals within our study stated that they would reach out to their family members regarding financial support, but not for relationship advice. In that case, they would reach out to their friends instead. They felt different levels of comfort with different individuals depending on the topics. Young people are able to connect both in-person or virtual environments. When they connect virtually, they can choose to be passive or active with their interactions. Passive virtual interactions consist of scrolling endlessly on social media or just browsing different profiles. This interaction causes a negative impact on young people because they constantly compare themselves to others. Not only that, but they are less likely to reach out for help due to the likelihood of being judged by others. Active virtual interactions consist of finding group chats that have individuals with similar interests, for example, Discord servers. These conversations allow people to find answers to questions and have discussions with others of similar interests. Some young adults stated feeling closer with these virtual connections than with their immediate family members. And I would actually be one of those too. These findings allow us to explore different ways to strengthen social support networks, such as creating awareness of resources on social media through mentors, peers, friends, and youth organizations. There are also more ways to strengthen their social support networks, such as recommending others to join Discord servers with their interests, attending social events, and playing cards or games. At student schools, it would be a great idea to have icebreaker tables to help those individuals have designated places to grow their network. Also, allowing a safe space for peer-led group activities helps young people connect more freely. People are actually less likely to accept resources if there's no trust though, but they accept resources when it comes from individuals similar to them or reputable sources. Our findings have been very inciting and will help us in our next steps. Next slide. We will be collaborating with Apprentice of Peace Youth Organization, which is a nonprofit that encourages others to pursue inner peace. We will also conduct focus groups to discuss social support and social connectedness. Last but not least, we will use these findings to test and refine the Partner Me Screener to better serve young people. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Martha. Okay, so last question for you. After going through all these different parts of the fellowship, what was surprising to you? What do you still have more questions about?
I would say what surprised me the most was how different interactions, passive or active, could impact the young person's willingness to accept resources. And I say this because that was actually me. I was always on Instagram or on Pinterest or Facebook, and I was always comparing myself. And it was harder for me to accept resources because I would feel like I would get judged by others because everyone else seems to have a perfect life. And what this project helped me realize is that technology can help or hinder you depending on how you use it.
Mm-hmm.
So
great, thank you. And so a couple of things, one thing I really appreciate is when all of you did what Martha just did, which was help us connect it back to you and yourselves as, youth experiencing these things. A lot of us on the call are trying to support youth or thinking about programs around it, but it's a pretty unique perspective to have your input on this topic and to hear your experiences. If anyone has questions, go ahead and put them in the chat right now. This is a pretty unique opportunity to hear from some folks who have become experts on social connectedness through this work. But I'll start with one question for Kyra, Martha, and Zoe. One of the things that we learned actually from Kimberly, as we started discussing how to do this project, was really how to approach this work with what we hope is a more authentic way of learning. And Kimberly did talk a little bit about that. But there's a lot of questions around how do we authentically engage youth in topics that affect them. And sometimes as adults, we get that right, and sometimes we get it wrong. You all as adults have a lot of knowledge and experience that you can teach us. So my question for you really is, like, what can people on this call who are hoping to do more work like this and more work on engaging young people in that work do to attract you into those kinds of programs and studies, but also really do it in an authentic way that values your experiences and your knowledge and expertise. So I'll kind of open it up for whoever wants to go.
Oh yeah, I'd like to go. So what helped making it a really authentic experience in my eyes, especially during the interviews, I would say that really trying to relate to the interviewees, so that way it doesn't just feel like, oh, I'm just interrogating them. But a method that I used was after they shared something personal, I also shared something personal about myself too, or I said like, oh yeah, I can relate in that way as well. Like one of them was a young lady who was a little younger than me, and she expressed being a part of a military family and how she was introverted and having to adjust and not really being close to that many people. So I was like, yeah, I'm from a military family too. And, I kind of struggled in that regard. And it just helps the overall flow of the conversation. The only drawback, I think, is just that we did have a time limit and, but yeah, I think it felt great.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Kyra. How about Zoe or Martha? Any thoughts on engaging and studying this kind of topic with youth?
I think it definitely helps to start when you're talking to young people, not to go directly into like the nitty gritty of what can we do to help you, what can we do to help you, and like ask them about themselves a little bit and kind of give them that freedom, that space to listen to the thoughts that they come up with first. We kind of saw that in our interviews. We would ask them to tell us a bit about themselves, and we'd get some really interesting responses because people would not only tell you, maybe what they're studying in school, but they tell us about what they like to do, with their free time, their hobbies. Do they like to play sports? Do they like to play certain video games? Do they like to knit? Do they like to sew? Those sort of things. And from there, you can really sort of understand what's important to them and kind of connect to them on that level as well.
Awesome. Great.
I would say what makes resources more authentic would be definitely having like a safe space, kind of building that trust, asking questions, exchanging information, not just kind of making it feel like pressured, kind of like what Zoe was talking about, like where it kind of feels like I'm talking to a robot. I don't want that kind of interaction because that doesn't feel genuine. And I would also say like vulnerability, like being vulnerable about yourself and like your experiences also helps those people loosen up and share more with you on what they need.
Nice. You know, and we've learned a lot about this. When we first started this fellowship, we had to kind of get to know each other. So we did some exercises together and kind of had to have some experiences of where we were learning about social connectedness or experiencing it ourselves. So I think that's kind of played out in the way that we've been able to create a neat working environment for us. There is a question here, and I'm going to reframe it just a little bit. And this is, so putting on your researcher hats. We had certain kinds of people available to us to talk to or survey. And I think sometimes we thought, well, do we have all of the right kinds of samples of, people? Are we representing everyone that has thoughts and opinions on this? So can you think of ways that we could expand who we might get more information from, do surveys with, that kind of thing? And, is there anything you felt was missing in the groups that we were able to talk to in terms of representation of youth voice?
Yes, I actually agree with what Laura said in some respects, especially as the research was going on. I'm coming from the perspective where I'm thinking that, okay, I want to help other young people, and even my goal involves helping, youth that are in foster care or,
Oh, I think Kyra there you go.
also had a strong support network behind them, whether it was really small or kind of large, but and that's very great. So how we would make light of that? Well, I think with getting some of the positives around how they connect, and then also learning more about what they need from their support network, it can definitely help us in reaching out to those who are more underserved. And that'll definitely come up in future research.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Kyra. Zoe and Martha, do you have any advice for, reaching more young people, different types, and expanding, the representation and sample of who we could contact and research?
I would suggest maybe trying to reach the students in schools that are in the free reduced lunch program, just because those students tend to have more needs and need more help. That's just an idea that I thought of right now.
Nice. Yeah. Okay.
And I think something else that could help too, because I know a lot of our participants tended to be from the same few states, mainly Florida, Georgia, and I want to say Colorado. They were just those few states, so I think it could be helpful to do perhaps more localized versions of the same survey to certain regions or certain states, so we can kind of see how that looks in other areas of the country.
Yeah. Great. So you all can tell that we don't come up with all the ideas on how to do research. It's really these very, very smart fellows who we've been working with who have come up with the research designs, helping us collect that data and then interpret it. For next steps there, Martha mentioned a few of them. And they're also going to be doing other presentations. You'll see in the link, if you go to the website, they've produced a couple of reports. So a report on the quantitative work, a report on the qualitative work. So make sure and go and check those out. I think we're all really proud of how well those came together. Yeah, and if anyone who's still on and claps for the fellows in the chat, or congratulations on finishing this presentation. It was definitely a lot of preparation and work for the fellows to get all of this together and get this far. So big thank you to everyone for participating. Everything's available afterwards, and thank you to Dr. Spring for all of her support at the foundation, and Rose and Kaylee and Jaleese and some others, and Sarah, who run the fellowship from at VNL. And Zoe and Martha and Kyra, thank you so much. You all are big superstars and are just doing great work here, and then also, you know, the work that you're doing back home. So we're really proud. You did a great job. So we will see everyone soon. Thank you for joining, and please stay connected. We have more fellow webinars coming up, and we hope that you will continue to stay part of our community. So thank you, everyone, and have a really great rest of your day.